Hi guys, welcome back. In this video, I'm gonna talk you about ranges, on how do I see them and how I approach them. So let's begin. Now, to have a range, we all know that we need a strong low that took our liquidity and broke structure and a strong high that takes our liquidity and then broke structure. Now, I prefer using always QMs whenever I marked up a range and don't use the three candle formation. Now you can also find ranges within this form. So it's basically two three candle formation. But that's not how I like to spot them, because if you see three candle formation, we all know that, let's say, a high can be displayed in this form, and that will be a high time frame point of view, instead of simply see a QM. That will be the lower time frame point of view when we look to three candle formation. So if we find ourselves in a range simply being made by two three candle formation, that will be we are on a high time frame point of view, and we can miss some data inside, right? So to me, the core elemental of a trading range are simply two QMs. So every time I mark up a range, I prefer always having two QMs, and then I can start looking to internal range liquidity and inducement, basically, right? So if I have the opportunity to drop down some time frames, I will 100% do it, because it's going to give me clearance. It's going to give me more data to what's actually inside of that range, right? Now, you can trade three candle formation, yeah, but you need more experience, and you need actually a lot of backtest, basically. You need a lot of data to see how price approaches high time frame ranges, because liquidity is not going to be displayed most of the times as three candle formation inside. So you have to use Alorial logic when you usually simply ranges being made by two types of three candle formation, right? So if you have the opportunity to drop down a few time frames and CQMs, I will definitely do it always. Right, so now that we have our range marked up, we have A and B. Now, my trading plan is made to be simple and systematic. So the first question after I have marked up my range, in this case from A to B, I have to ask this question: do I have internal range liquidity? Right, this answer will determine the outcome on how we'll approach the range. Now, there are only two answers. That will be basically yes or no. So you can't escape, basically. Now, what is liquidity for me, and what's a range with the internal range liquidity? Now, liquidity to me are simply three candle formations, equal lows, also relative equal lows, and let's say triangular liquidity. Right there. These are the only types of liquidity. Now, if we look on a high time frame point of view, let's say of a three candle formation, will be a single candle, and then will simply be a wick. But we can't think about every single wick being liquidity, because we'll simply end up with a mess in our mind. So that's why I restrict, in my point of view, by only seeing this type of liquidity, right? Now, you can't, let's say, see this range on the 1 minute and say that all of this is internal range liquidity. You can't, because you can also mark up the range, let's say, onto the seconds, and you'll find internal range liquidity even being built down there, and price won't come right there. Not because it's too far away, but because this is not enough liquidity to come. So you can't just take a random time frame and just say, oh, that's the range and that's the internal range liquidity. You have to compare what you see on other time frames. Now, I know a lot of you are confused about the actual use of time frames, but don't think jumping between the 1 minute and the 5 minute give you different structure. You don't have a chart on the 1 minute and you don't have another chart on the 5 minute, right? You simply have a different point of view of the same exact structure, right? Because the actual market is only one. You only can have different point of views of the same, right? And you need to tie up everything to get the most accurate point of view. That's our job when you actually want to look for a trade. So let's say this range is going to be the 5-minute. I will jump, let's say, 2 time frames below just to see what happened on the 1 and the 3-minute. And I will also look up to a few time frames, let's say more higher. So I will look to for sure at the 15-minute, and I will be pretty much done for my point of view of the overall range, right? So now I can tap what I see on all of these time frames and get an opinion about the range I'm actually inside, right? That's how we should use time frames, not to actually confuse us, but just to have different point of views of the same picture. Because we're simply looking the same range from A to B on different perspective to give us more data as possible, to be more accurate when we look for ranges, right? Now, I have to simply spot the internal range equity that are all of these types. So I can find, let's say, 3 candle formation right here, let's say equal lows, and then a 3 candle formation right there. And overall, it made a triangle liquidity, right? Liquidity can be displayed on every single form. You can say have a definitive guide to how liquidity should form because every scenario is different and you have to tie up everything. Liquidity is also going to be displayed differently on every single range. And that's where our logic comes to help us now. This range has internal range equity. You see how price after taking out the QM has very close this internal range equity, right? The internal range equity should be close to where the QM forms. Because if it isn't close, market will just randomly react and go up. Has high chances to do it. Let's say if right here there isn't internal range equity, and the closest internal will be this liquidity right there. Price don't have a reason to come down there. It's too far away because in the middle there is simply nothing. So there is no reason for price to come and reach this liquidity right here. It might create some inducement, and now price can just take it and go. But it will depend a lot on the range you're in, right? So if you have a range formed like this, you can't think the price will come down and take out this internal range liquidity. In the future, it will, because let's say there are equal lows and structural point that don't make any sense. But right now, when we have our range right here being formed, price is too far away from the liquidity. It don't make sense for price to actually reach that area, right? So a consequence for price reaching this area can be price creating a major inducement that can be for us basically T1 and T2, right? Or simply releasing a high impact news that will get, let's say, a big move simply by releasing all of the volume inside, right? Or let's say the unlucky scenario that can be a consequence of failure swings, right? Because price can fail multiple times, so why not? But if right here there is anything, price should just, let's say, react to some areas even inside and just go. That's what we think, right? Now, have this clear, we have our range. Now, all of these, most of the time, are going to be untested QMs, so potentially obstacles. Now, don't think the price will behave in this way, when you have all the internal range liquidity. Because what we see on a realistic scenario is just price giving at least a pullback, come to the area, and then reverse. Or on some scenarios, he never does that pullback, just came straight and then reverse. Right? Don't think the price will create a lot of pullback. On some scenarios, it will. But if you don't want to get stopped out when you look for pullbacks, ask yourself this question. If price is going to make a single pullback and you have all of this area that look, let's say, textbook, which one will you prefer seeing price giving a pullback? So you have to run up confluences to actually understand which one for you is the one that has high probabilities that give you the pullback, right? And that will increase a lot your ratio when you want, let's say, to ping pong, so basically anticipate the direct entry right here, or just, let's say, get the right area to anticipate the opposite QM to form, and why not catch some entries inside to reverse, right? So ask yourself on which of these internal range liquidity or untested QM or untested PIs is going to get a pullback, and you will be more accurate. Don't think that just every single untested QM or untested PI is going to give you a reaction, because that's not how it works. We have to tie up everything from this strategy, right? So how we can approach a range like this? That is very simple. Now we have our range A to B, that will be our red range, right? This is going to be our high time frame one, is going to give us the external range liquidity that in this case we suppose B to get taken, right? Because let's say in the overall, we are bullish. That's perfect. So now how the range cycle works is simply price taking out internal range liquidity and then price moving to the external range liquidity, right? So that's how the cycle works. That's what we studied, and that's what we have to apply now. Don't think that just you see sometime price just taking out the first liquidity, reversing. Sometimes you see it taking the second one, reversing. Another scenario, you see price taking the whole internal range liquidity, right? Sometimes price will just react to random areas, won't fulfill all the internal range liquidity, and that can be a mistake that you made because you weren't able to actually spot all the internal range liquidity, or simply you don't have the right confidence, or just, let's say, price reacted randomly, right? Because price sometimes can just react to random areas, random PIs, and for you, you don't have, let's say, any way to actually figure it out what it is, right? And that can be all right for us. So how we can actually work with it is just trade what you see, trade what you studied. So for us, if this is a range from A to B, what we can do is simply expect price to take all of the internal range liquidity, and then we can start looking for some PIs right below here, right? That's what we see, that's what we studied. So to approach it, we can just now expect price giving a bearish market structure and just execute, right? That's what we see, that's what we studied. So if price is going to give right here an opposite QM, we can start look for setups. So now B is going to be strong until we fulfill the overall range cycle, taking out the whole internal range liquidity of the previous range, right? So now inside our purple range, we got internal range liquidity, and we can actually start catching this entry right here on some unmitigated PI. Then when price comes, we can just execute, target the external or the internal range liquidity resting on our high time frame range. And then why not, if price makes another QM, we can start stacking until this target will get fulfilled. But let's say in this example, we reach our target and we came on our high time frame PI right here. If price makes a QM, and remember that we need always QM, we can start looking for longs inside this orange range right here. Because price makes a QM, let's say makes another. Now we got the load that will be shared from this green range right here. And now we can apply the same logic we applied on our high time frame range, looking for some internal range liquidity and our PIs. Get them, and we can look to all of these external. These are all targets plus, let's say, some internal range liquidity where you can exit full position or take, let's say, some partial until the full target will get fulfilled. You can also stack while this green range will get fulfilled. And let's say price makes another QM. You will have another structural point. Let's make it pink. From this low to this high, you can look to internal range liquidity. And enter the closest PI, in this case, let's say this breaker block right here. That's perfect. And that's how you can stack and how you can catch the most high probable setup within the day. Now, you can also look to obstacles to anticipate all of these reactions following our simple logic, right? But to me, that's not simply high probable trades because sometimes price is just gonna break through. So always wait for 2 QMs and you will catch the highest probable setup in the way, right? Now, pro-trending and counter-trending doesn't exist. It's something that has been told to you to just confuse yourself and don't make you actually confident on every single trade, right? This trade right here is a counter trend inside the range A to B, right? Because it's going to be bullish and we are catching shorts. But on his own perspective, so the purple perspective, that's a pro trend because we have a high, a strong high, and a weak low, and our target down there. So you understand that counter trending doesn't exist in reality, right? This isn't counter trending, or to say better, is counter trending if you look to another perspective, but in reality, everything will be pro trending and counter trending. Like let's say on the 1 minute you're bullish, and on the 15-minute you're bearish, you will be counter trending. But if on the 1 hour you again bullish, that will be pro trending. So you see that these don't make any kind of sense. So if your setup looks nice and makes sense inside your overall range, just take it, because that will be pro trending. Counter trending to me simply means, let's say, anticipating POIs, let's say obstacles, to actually give a reaction, but taking them directly. Right, and the cycle repeats over and over. You can also catch all of these longs inside simply because they will be lower time frame bullish trend, bullish ranges inside of this structure. We will have internal range liquidity or inducement to be made. Now, all the ranges are covered right now has internal range liquidity. There are 2 types of ranges we're gonna come into, and it will be simply the one with internal range liquidity that we already covered. So simply when you find them, you understand where your internal range liquidity is by switching on to multiple time frames to give you different point of view of the range. Then you tie up everything and you just execute on the closest area to that liquidity. Right, that's how we approach them. And we can do the same thing inside to our range. Now, how do we can actually trade a range without internal range liquidity? So let's say we have a strong low and a strong high right here, but there isn't internal range liquidity inside. Now, you will have your OB somewhere on this area, on the high time frame. If there isn't internal range liquidity, we can't take any kind of trade, right? Because a rule for our POI is it must be close to liquidity. So if there is no liquidity, there is no POI for us to actually catch a trade from. Now, there are 2 only scenarios that can happen on a range with an internal range liquidity. The first one will be T1 and the second one will be T2, right? That's why we have a systematic and objective way of trading, right? So now, if price is going to, let's say, give a pullback and break structure, let's say we are inside this range, and it's going to form a QM right here. Ask yourself this question. Now we have the red range and the purple one right here. What did the purple low inside the red range? Your answer is going to be, he didn't do nothing. He can do something, right? There is no internal. So on a high time frame perspective, what happened? That will be that this low and from this actually high we got internal range liquidity right now. So we have a reason to potentially come on something right here, right? That can be, let's say, some unmitigated wick on this scenario. Price won't come right here if your liquidity is too far away, right? So we got our area, and now price can come, take out the trap, because all the traders are gonna see brick structures right there, and they will find some random area right here to actually catch a long. They will get stopped out. Meanwhile, we catch the long right here, and now they're gonna see this brick structure to giving them a bias, so they all want to short here, and why not here? And they're gonna get stopped out. And the reality for us, that's simply a T1 simplified, right? Because this purple low don't make sense inside the previous range that will be our red range, right? So to resume it quickly, you have to question yourself about structural point. What did they make, right? But don't question too hard. That will be right in front of your eyes. There is internal range liquidity, price broke structure, and very close to it formed a QM, right? So price is gonna give a reaction. Why is this zone should hold? There is no sense, right? So always question yourself, but don't question it too hard. It's pretty easy to see. Now I gave you this point of view, so you can actually be more aware to actually catch T1 when you see them. Just question yourself about valid structural point, why they should be valid, right? So that will be T1 for us. Now for T2 is what is going to happen the most. Following my experience and my data, T2 happens the most that T1, and if I have to make a percent, that will be 70% T2 and the other percentage about T1. So what T1 shows is that we have our red range, and price is gonna, let's say, to create a QM right here, or however react from, and it's going to fail to take out this high. Failing will make the low weak because it created a failure swing. Price is gonna take it, and then we got our inducement that will be basically T2 for us, and catch actually some longs down there. Again, price don't have a reason to come here if the liquidity or the inducement is right here. Then it can go because price create equal highs, triangular liquidity, and also gonna give to all the traders that look for confirmation entries these tiny BOS to look longs. They see the BOS and they get stopped out again, right? Now, as you can see, the market is so dangerous if you don't have this type of logic. And as you can see, they're very clear in our way of trading, right? Because we have simply two rules, and we can actually use the most common traps that market create every single day, right? Because you can't find a day without a range. You can't find a range without a T1 or a T2, right? Because that's the algo that prints this pattern over and over every single day since the market began, right? So that will be basically how we can approach ranges. I hope this video helped you to understand better T1 and T2 and in general how you can use ranges. And that's all for this video. So see you until the next one.